Every one of us is born into a different set of circumstances. What was your lottery ticket in life? When you opened your eyes on day one, where were you? There's 8 billion of us all walking around on this earth and we're all believing different things. How has your religion impacted how you think about yourself? And the media has a massive impact on what we think and what we believe. So we've got to be very aware of what we consume. Our kids growing up today in the age of social media, what are they looking at? What are they consuming? We're living in an age of influencers and their job is to influence. We have to be very, very aware that the media influences us. The whole concept of making the unconscious conscious is very, very powerful. And in terms of that, we need to be questioning where my thoughts and my beliefs actually come from. If I'm hanging on to them that strongly, why do I believe in them? Where did I hear them for the first time? Are they serving me well? Welcome back to the next edition of the Thoughtonomy Podcast. It's just me in the studio today. I'm going to be taking you through the next chapter of the book. And if you've watched a couple of the earlier episodes, all I'm trying to do is just give you a little bit of an insight, chapter by chapter, into the book Thoughtonomy. And this chapter that we're doing today is chapter 4. It's called Born This Way. I love the title of this chapter. I may mention at some point in the book, every time I wrote a chapter of this book, I couldn't wait. I had a very special close person who would read the chapter. She knows me very well, and there were a couple of times where she'd pinpoint things that I've missed, and she'd kind of wake up and go, that doesn't sound like you. But this was the one chapter that she named. We were struggling to find a name for this chapter, and I think it comes from a Lady Gaga song, Born This Way. It just kind of struck us over a glass of champagne. So I love the title of this chapter. And Born This Way is a chapter that really delves into your conditioning, the reasons behind your conditioning. If you've been following the process of this chapter by chapter story, you'll understand that your behavior as a human being largely is defined by your past conditioning and your emotions. So in this chapter, I'll look at, well, what are the aspects of your conditioning or the aspects of your past conditioning that would have an influence on the way you think and ultimately the way that you behave. And for some of these, you might not even be aware of them. And there was a quote, and I said to Luke off camera, Luke's our sound guy, engineer, producer, sitting in the background here. I saw this quote and I actually forgot about it. And I'm going to read it out to you, or I'm going to say it out to you. It's a little protagonistic, and please don't take it that way. I think the person who uses this quote, he's an international speaker. He is that sort of speaker. He's very protagonistic. He wants to shock. But the essence behind what he's saying has a point. So just hear me out. And how the quote goes, he says, if you're born poor, it's not your fault. But if you die poor, then that's on you. Wow, quite shocking, right? Let's break it down. If you are born poor, of course it's not your fault. Every one of us is born into a different set of circumstances. In my talk on stage, I actually referred to it as what was your lottery ticket in life? When you opened your eyes on day one, where were you? What life were you born into? Were you born into a life of poverty, or were you born into a life of royalty? All of us wanted to grow up being a prince or a princess. I think most people, we would have looked at the lives of Prince Harry and Prince William growing up as princes, and we would have all thought, wow, that would be so amazing. It's also not their fault that they were born into royalty. So if you are born poor, it's not your fault. But what he comes at with the second part of the quote is, if you die poor, then that's on you. And I think what he's referring to there is that over the sequence of our life, we all have opportunities to learn and grow, to make different choices, to escape the mindset and the thinking behind the set of circumstances that we're born into. And if you consider the 4 aspects in this chapter that are massively influential on influencing the way you think about yourself and the way that you think about the world around you, all these conditioned thoughts have an impact on the way you behave. And a person who's born into poverty, don't get me wrong, it's a lot harder. You know, your circumstances, your set of circumstances that you are born into make life a little more difficult. Of course it does. But are there examples of people who have been born into poverty and have ended up having very fruitful, successful lives? Absolutely. And it all comes down to understanding that the way you think, the values, the morals, and the principles that have been conditioned into your unconscious mind impact the way that you behave. So you can stay a victim, you can stay trapped in a certain way of thinking, but that's never going to benefit you or serve you in terms of the life that you want to lead. So let's have a look at the 4 aspects that I mentioned in the book that do have a massive bearing on the way that you think about yourself and the way that you think about the world around you. And the first one that I talk about is, when you were born, what country were you born in? Where were you when you opened your eyes? I was born in 1977 in apartheid South Africa. And I always say that I'm very fortunate that I was born into a family which had fairly liberal views. It wasn't my fault that I was born at that time and in that era, but certainly the way I think, the way I think about the world around me is going to be very, very different if I had been born in 1977 in Umlazi Township in Durban, for example. The way I would have been conditioned to think about myself and the way I think about the world around me would have been hugely different in terms of how my life played out. But governments are run by people. It just so happened that when I was born, the government that was in power had very, very harsh and discriminatory laws in our country, which were not right. Again, not my fault, but I was born into that environment. I always think about what life would have been like if I'd been born in North Korea. How would my life have turned out? If I'd been born in North America or in America. I remember growing up, for example, one of my biggest fears was that I would have to go to army. In South Africa, when you left school, there was forced military conscription for 2 years. I think it was 1 year at the time when I was coming out of school. That was my biggest fear growing up, that I would have to go to army. I would have prolonged it, I would have gone to university, but I still would have had to go to army after university. And those were the laws of the government at the time. But I had a massive fear that that's what I would have to do. If I was born in America, I would have had a completely, probably different view on the military. You're almost raised in America to believe that it is the heart of patriotism to go and serve your country, where most men actually look forward to going to the army. But in our environment in South Africa, going to army and being forced into military conscription tied very much into the apartheid teachings of the government and the control that the government had over the way you think at the time. So where were you born when you opened your eyes? The culture, the heritage, everything has an impact on the way that we think about ourselves and the way that we think about the world around us. The second question, and I'm just throwing questions at you here, I'm not offering opinions, I can give you my experience. The second massive influence over the way that we think and what we believe is religion. And it makes absolute sense. We have about 4,100 to 4,300 different religions. All religions have, as a fundamental, 2 aspects to it. They have a belief system on how we live our lives, and we also have a belief system on what happens to us after we die. And fundamentally, most religions are about love. But what religion has been an influence over the way that you think? And how has your religion impacted what you think about yourself and what you think about the world around you? There's also a big lesson in empathy here. If we consider that there are 7-8 billion human beings on Earth who all think differently, who all have different past set of circumstances, possibly all have different faiths and believe in different gods. I think as the statistics stand now, Christianity is the most followed religion, followed closely by Islam, and on a trajectory course to be sort of comparable to Christianity by the year 2050. The third largest group of followers on Earth, or followers of religion, are people who have agnostic or atheistic faith. In other words, they do not believe that there is a God. So there's 8 billion of us all walking around on this earth, and we're all believing different things. But the only question I ask here is, how has your religion impacted how you think about yourself and how you think about the world around you? The third aspect that I look at in the book is the media. And the media has a massive impact on what we think and what we believe. And the media is run by people, editors, owners of news agencies, and because they are human beings, they all have their own agendas, their own past conditioning, and their own emotions that impacts their behavior. The first lesson I ever learned on the media was if you live in South Africa Every Sunday night at 7 o'clock, you know what I'm talking about. There's a certain TV show that came up on Mnet and DSTV, and I think it got to a point that even the music of Carte Blanche, when that music came on a Sunday night, like for whatever reason, the Monday blues would kick in. We were programmed to all sit around our couches as a family on a Sunday night watching Carte Blanche, and the prominent emotion or the prominent story type that was the most popular was the most negative, the most shocking, the most horrific. Probably produced that way. I remember when I worked in my early days of Remax, we actually went and did media training. And one of the producers of Carte Blanche was the lady who was teaching us and giving us the media training. And she told us all those shows are produced. Every documentary you ever watch, I know they ask you questions, but it's so easy for a producer to influence a certain storyline. And the same thing would happen on Carte Blanche. So if you watched too many horrific stories on Carte Blanche on a Sunday night, well, Monday morning wasn't quite the same. So I made a decision to stop watching it. I haven't watched it in about 12 years. And I actually turned to writing an email on a Sunday night to my staff instead. And that email went out for 5 years. It was just something that I did. And the feedback that I got was they'd get into the office on Monday morning and they'd get this slightly different email focused on positivity and motivation, as opposed to getting to work on a Monday and you carrying any form of negativity from the media. So we've got to be very aware of what we consume. Also, our kids growing up today in the age of social media, what are they looking at? What are they consuming? I don't have to tell you that social media is not as authentic as we would have it, or we would like to believe. We're living in an age of influencers, and their job is to influence, whether it's a particular brand or a lifestyle choice, or possibly even your choice in elections. Governments are using social media to influence populations on how they vote. So we have to be very, very aware that the media influences us. So how is your consumption of media impacting the way that you think about yourself and the world around you? And then the fourth aspect is probably the most strongest, or the strongest influence for us. And if you consider that human beings crave acceptance, we crave being part of community. We like to be in a community where we feel welcomed and familiar. Consider your own circle of friends. Very difficult to have a close circle of friends with people who have fundamentally different views and beliefs to yourself. I know me, for example, I would struggle to be friendly with somebody who has maybe largely racist views, or perhaps a man who treats women badly, is abusive or strongly male chauvinist. I would struggle to have a person like that in a circle of friends. So we tend to be friendly with and settle in community and societies where people have the similar kind of thinking to ourselves. And it starts from your closest form of community, which is your family. So who were the people that were around you when you were born? Conditioning starts very strongly in the first 7 years of our life, where we are little sponges. And we are consuming, we are downloading morals and values and beliefs largely from the people who are around us the most. And if you're fortunate enough to have a mom and a dad, it would have been them. If you didn't have a mom and a dad, who were the people around you when you were born? And how did they influence the way you think, not only about yourself, but of the world around you as well? And there's a concept of generational thinking, which I talk about in the book, where probably the way I raised my kids is largely influenced by the way I was raised by my parents, and the way they raised me was probably largely influenced by the way they were raised by their parents. And if you consider the download of the first 7 years, my parents were probably largely influenced in the way that they think and the things that they believe by their parents, my grandparents. So if we don't catch ourselves and question the thoughts and the beliefs that we've been hanging on to ever since we were 7 years old, we don't break the cycle. And the world changes so fast around us. If I was trying to raise my kids today on the morals, values, principles, and beliefs of my grandparents, I would really be struggling. And there's probably a large part of me that does, because a lot of this is unconscious. So it's just understanding the concept of generational thinking, but constantly questioning yourself. Are my behaviors, are my actions, are they serving me in pursuit of the life that I want to live? If not, then where do I catch myself? Where or how possibly are my thoughts and my beliefs influencing my behaviors that are leading me in another direction? In other words, in the opposite direction to where I want to go in my life. How long would you keep driving to Johannesburg if you realized that you were actually on the road to Cape Town? At what point would you stop and turn around? Or would you just keep driving? So the whole concept of making the unconscious conscious is very, very powerful. And in terms of that, we need to be questioning where my thoughts and my beliefs actually come from. If I'm hanging on to them that strongly, why do I believe in them? Where did I hear them for the first time? And are they serving me well? So that's the point of the chapter, is just to break down the 4 elements or the 4 aspects of where our conditioning begins. And it's for you to literally sit and read. I think this is the chapter where a lady that I know, she stopped me once and we were at a restaurant in Umhlanga, and she said, Grant, she said, I've read your book. And I just want you to know that on page 73, it felt like you were sitting on the bed punching me in the face. I'd never thought of that before. And this concept is powerful. So go have a read. There's a lot more in the chapter than what I've told you about, but that's just to give you a little bit of an insight into chapter 4, Born This Way. We'll catch you next time.